Valar Morghulis. All men die. So with the 7th season of Game of Thrones behind us, I still kind of have Game of Thrones on the brain, and that has cued me to want to revisit some of the lists I did about the show before, but I was kind of hard-pressed to think about what I wanted to do. I wasn't entirely sure I wanted to do a best characters list again because largely that hasn't changed. I thought about revisiting my worst characters list because that one has changed from the last time I've done it, significantly so, except that that one changed in such a way that it almost doesn't feel worth doing because the reason that old list changed was a lot of the characters I didn't like turned out to have really good arcs over time that just hadn't paid off yet at the time I did that list. So it's actually not even topic I really feel like I want to deal with anymore. Not to mention that's one of the most disliked videos I ever did. So instead, I'm going to revisit my best Game of Thrones deaths lists, which is the one I had the most fun with anyways. So I'm going to go through what I think are the 10 best deaths, and exactly what makes any specific death good or bad is going to vary. Some of these are just viscerally satisfying, some of them are traumatic, some of them are impactful, and all of them are great. And there are some great deaths that are not going to make this list. You can go back and look at my older list and compare and realize that some of these things got bumped off with some of the newer deaths that we got in the last few years since I did this last. So, oh, and I should not have to say this, but serious spoilers coming up for the show, okay? That's enough preamble. Let's get into this thing. With number 10, Catelyn Stark. I'm going to tell you right now, this is the only death from the Red Wedding that is going to be on this list. And that should tell you the kind of caliber of deaths that we're dealing with here, that it was the only Red Wedding death to make it on here. The reason I picked this one over the other ones is Robb's wife, I think, is the most shocking one. Robb himself is possibly the most, deflating as an audience member. But for me, there's something about Catelyn Stark's death, just screaming at Robb to run, and he doesn't even have the strength anymore, and she's just watching everything fall apart, and she's threatening Walder Frey's wife, and he just doesn't care. And she knows that at this point, nothing she does matters. And in this really quiet, horrible, traumatic moment, she just cuts this woman's throat because it's the only thing she can do. It doesn't make a difference, but she's gonna do something. And then she just stands there. Same thing is done to her. And it's such a defeated moment. And I think for me, it's the death that sums up the Red Wedding the best of all of the deaths that happened at the Red Wedding. So that's why that one is the one that makes the list. Moving up a slot, we're going to go to number 9, Tommen Baratheon. There's just something really cool about how quiet and unassuming, and for me, whoa, this death was. He is alone in his room. He's looking out the window at the destruction, at what his mother has wrought. We have no idea if he realized his mother is the one who caused this or not. I think he probably did suspect. I think he's smart enough for that. But regardless, he has just watched so much that he cares about literally go up in smoke, takes off the crown, walks off camera, walks back into camera, into the window, down, gone. Just the quietness of it, and he obviously just made the decision well, that's it, I'm done, and out he goes. And it's shocking in a way that's distinctly different from something like the Red Wedding, which is shocking not only that it happens, but because of how violent it is. We don't see the impact of the fall. All we see is just him drop, and it's just whoa, it's almost surreal, but I love it. Number 8, Peter Baelish. I was really tempted to put this one higher because I was really ready to see him die. The only reason I didn't put this in the upper half of the list is that the death itself is a fairly standard one. It's a throat cut, but boy, the build up to that death, oh, do I love it. Because this is literally the only time we've ever seen Littlefinger on the back foot. He's always been in control. He's always been in command. He's always had a plan. He has always been on top, and he's always been smugly letting everybody know, I got this. I got this every step of the way. To just watch that fall away and to actually watch him flounder, watch every possible escape that he can think of just not work. When he orders, take me back to the Eyrie, and it doesn't, they say no, and he just turns to Sansa, who is so perfectly cold in this scene, and just that at the end, he is reduced to this pitiful, begging, just little shell of a man. That was perfect. That more than death, that of having everything that he thought he was in control of stripped away from him until all he could do was plead, perfect. And the fact that he got killed with that dagger that originated from him to try and kill Bran, even better. Number 7, Oberyn Martell. This one is so brutal that I've got to use one of the most toned down images I can find to represent it, because the image I used to represent it in my earlier video got the video flagged for being inappropriate material. So yeah, I do honestly think that the death of Oberyn Martell might be the single most brutal death I have seen on any screen. Movie, television, video game. Whoa. God. And I mean, part of it is just, maybe it's my own buttons. I think prior to this, the death that made me go, the most was in Blade Runner with Dr. Tyrell's death in that. And it was very similar. It was the same sort of head crushy, thumb in the eye thing. But this one takes that and cranks it up to past 11. Wow. Just the brutality of it. And he had won. All he had to do was not gloat. But it gave the mountain that opening. And once the guy got his hands on him, that was it. And man, oh man. Wow. Honestly, I have not rewatched that part of that episode. I can't. Man. It's bad. In like a way that I will never forget, but I also think I don't ever want to actually watch again. Number 6, Ramsay Bolton. Here's another satisfying one, not only because of who is getting the kill, and obviously I think we were all really, really ready for Ramsay to bite it, but the dogs. Oh, just ate his face. And again, Here's Sansa showing back up on this list. Just when she gets cold, oh boy, she is scary, honestly. But I mean, this was just perfect, because this is his own cruelty coming back to him. Not just because this was a way that he had killed other people before, but because the dogs are starving because he doesn't care about them. He doesn't care about anything. He cares about them as a means to an end. He only cares about them as a torture and murder device. So of course he keeps them starving. He doesn't care about these dogs. Well, you know what, buddy? You bet you really wish you'd treated those dogs better and hadn't kept them on the verge of starving all the time, because now you're in a doggy bag. Number 5, Tywin Lannister. This one, not dissimilar to Peter Baelish, is just something wonderfully undignified about this death, which just, again, much like Littlefinger, feels very ironically appropriate for a character who was always in control, always in command, gets a death that nobody would ever choose to have. Just sitting on the crapper. And crossbow bolts. Nobody would put that on their list of ways I would prefer to die. It's embarrassing, it's humiliating, and to have it be done by someone that he thinks so little of. Forgive the pun, but it's a perfect death committed by just the right person in just the right way. The man who would have been the power behind the throne, dying on the least dignified throne available. Number 4, Joffrey Baratheon. Here's another one. Man, we waited. We had to wait a while for this one because even before Ramsay Bolton, Littlefinger was fun. Joffrey, I think we were all just going, just die, Joffrey, when will you die? And then the second cough. And you realize it's happening, and he starts to go purple and veiny, and and just how awful it looks, and just everybody saying around, very clear, everyone's kind of surprised, but the only person who cares is Cersei, and she goes up to him. But man, you're looking around and going, pretty much everybody except the woman holding him right now would happily have been the one to deliver that poison. It's his wedding. It's one of his way too many moments of triumph. He's on top of the world. It's all about him until he just starts to choke and discolor, and the eyes go, oh, it looked really bad, which was perfect. That is what he needed, and it needed to be drawn out just a little bit, and it was. He needed to know he was dying, and he did, and it was good. Number 3, a little bit of a different one here, Elena Tyrell. Possibly the least eventful death that is going to be on this list. Tommen was kind of uneventful too, but that had a certain shock value to it. This doesn't even have that, because we get a heads up, before she touches that drink, what it is, and she drinks it voluntarily, but she has the only death where I think I can say went out like a boss. Death is not a particularly dignified thing in Westeros. Generally, when characters die, it's not nobly on the battlefield. Generally, they die being stabbed in the back. People don't get heroic, sacrificing deaths. And Elena's death here is not particularly heroic, let me be clear. But she goes out on her own terms. She downs that stuff and looks Jaime dead in the eye. I killed Joffrey. And you will get no satisfaction out of knowing that. You won't get to take revenge. What are you going to do? It's a mic drop moment. She's just sitting there going, I lost. I killed your son. Out. Peace. Out like a boss. Up to number 2, and last time I did this list, this came in at my number 1 death. Viserys Targaryen. This is one I think a lot of people forget about because it was a season 1 death, and it wasn't played in as big a moment as, say, Ned Stark's death was or Khal Drogo's death was, but what a satisfying end for that miserable little prick on so many levels. Because, first of all, I love the irony of it. Because he wants his golden crown, and he thinks he's safe because they can't spill blood in the tent, but it doesn't matter. So Khal Drogo pours this molten gold onto his head, kills him without spilling a drop of blood, yet in a way that is really horrific, but is this horrible, ironic death that is this weird, twisted version of the thing he was just shouting that he wanted. And then when he falls and the metal, the gold has kind of cooled a little bit and his head clunk onto the ground. Oh, that sound. I love that sound. That's still probably, in terms of a visceral, yes, for me, still the most satisfying death. But it doesn't quite make my number 1 death. It did last time I did this list. This time, I got to put another one up there. And it is unique in this. Because I said characters don't get heroic, sacrificial deaths. Well, there's one who did. And that's my number 1. And that's Hodor. Now, we don't actually see the moment that he dies, but we know he does. And Hodor is, first of all, such an endearing character. And we've had so much time, and he's just been there without having to like highlight him, give him a very special episode all to himself. He's just been there endearing himself to us this whole time for years up to this point. And then when he's holding the door and you see the determination in his face holding it, and then as the flashbacks are happening and you hear the voice calling out, hold the door, and you see the younger version of him fall to the ground and start to convulse, hold the door, until it devolves into Hodor, and you realize this is literally what his life became. This moment is everything he is going to do with his life, and it has been set in stone since he was a teenager. And it is awful and wonderful and beautiful and tragic and sad and yet triumphant. It is this wonderful mix of all these emotions all wrapped up in this reveal that happens at the exact same time as he just stands there and holds that door for however long it is that he's going to be able to do that. And it is one of my favorite moments in this show at all, and it is definitely my favorite death in Game of Thrones. So that's my top 10. There are a ton of great deaths I didn't even touch on. I couldn't even get to. So what are your favorite deaths from the show? Are they some of the ones I mentioned? Are they some of the ones I opted to leave off? Whatever they are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, check me out on Twitter at Council of Geeks. Give a listen to the Council of Geeks podcast, available on iTunes and Stitcher. I'm also one half of the Punch Like a Girl podcast, also available on iTunes and Stitcher. And until next time, this council is adjourned.